Officer hands you a ticket, then looks past you at your passenger and says, "Step out of the vehicle." That is not a safety move. That is the opening play of one of the most legally engineered tactics in traffic stop procedure. Once separation happens, two people who knew exactly the same answers 60 seconds ago are questioned alone, under pressure, unable to compare notes. What comes out of those separate conversations can justify a search, support a charge, defeat every suppression motion you file. There are specific words that must come before the separation, not after, before. The tactic? Most people assume separation is procedural. Officers move passengers to control the scene, reduce distraction, establish an orderly conversation. That explanation is partly true and entirely misleading. Law enforcement training documentation published in American Police Beat magazine lays out the real calculation plainly. While questioning the driver, officers are instructed to watch the passenger, specifically to observe whether the passenger shows physical reactions or appears tense in response to the driver's answers. The instruction that follows is precise. If anyone in the car becomes uncomfortable, stop asking questions and separate them. That sentence is the tactical reality stripped of procedural framing. Separation is not the default posture. It is the response to a signal. The signal being that the officer believes the people in the car know something worth pursuing and that separating them will make it harder to keep their answers coordinated. Stay calm. The separation does not mean you are under arrest. It means the officer has decided that the information available to two people together is more protected than the information available from those same two people alone. That distinction is what this video turns on. The science. Here is what law enforcement training teaches about why separation works. Two people who experience the same event will naturally remember it slightly differently. They use different words, emphasize different details, order things in a different sequence. In ordinary conversation, those differences are invisible. The two people align their language, fill each other's gaps, correct each other's timing without realizing it. The moment they are separated, those natural differences become visible, and in the documented legal standard from federal circuit court rulings, vague, inconsistent, or evasive answers with respect to travel plans are explicitly listed as factors supportive of reasonable suspicion. The court in United States v. Simpson stated this standard directly. What the officer is looking for after separation is not proof of a crime. It is a gap, a discrepancy between what you said and what your passenger said on something as ordinary as where you are coming from. Those gaps do not have to be lies. They do not have to be intentional. Under stress, questioned separately, the natural divergence of two honest accounts is almost always enough to produce them. Stay calm. Body camera footage captures every word from the moment that door opens. Wilson's framework. The legal foundation that makes separation possible is Maryland v. Wilson, decided by the Supreme Court in 1997. The ruling is direct. An officer making a traffic stop may order passengers out of the car pending completion of the stop. The vote was 8-1. No articulable suspicion required. Wilson extended Pennsylvania v. Mims, which gave officers authority over drivers, to every occupant of the vehicle. In 2007, Brendlin v. California confirmed the other side. Passengers are seized for Fourth Amendment purposes the moment the car is pulled over, which means passengers can challenge the legality of the stop. And in 2009, Arizona v. Johnson extended further. Officers may pat down a passenger during a traffic stop if they can articulate a reason to believe that passenger may be armed and dangerous. What Wilson created is not just the authority to physically move a passenger away from the driver. It created the legal architecture for everything that follows: the separate questioning, the separate body camera documentation, the separate entries in the officer's report. The Mims-Wilson framework gives officers the tools. The interrogation science gives officers the strategy. Your body camera and the officer's body camera are both running. What Wilson does not require is that you say nothing before it happens. The words. Here is what you say before the separation begins. When the officer indicates the passenger should step out, before any physical movement occurs, the driver says this: "Officer, We both invoke our right to remain silent. I do not consent to any searches. Say it calmly. Say it clearly. Do not raise your voice. The body camera is recording. Now break down what each element does legally. The phrase we both establish is a shared, simultaneous invocation on the record, captured on the officer's body camera, before the two of you are separated and can no longer coordinate. The phrase invoke our right to remain silent is not conversation. It is a legal act. Under Salinas v. Texas, the Supreme Court held that silence alone does not invoke Fifth Amendment protection. You have to say the words. By saying them for both occupants before separation, you create an audible, body camera captured invocation that applies to both people before a single question has been asked. The phrase, I do not consent to any searches, closes the Fourth Amendment door in the same breath. Stay calm. Do not add anything. Do not explain. The statement is complete as spoken. Everything after it exists inside the legal record it just created. What the words do. The legal function of that pre-separation statement, it eliminates the evidentiary gap that separation is designed to produce. Once both occupants have invoked on the record before separation, the officer's ability to use divergent answers as reasonable suspicion is dramatically curtailed, because neither person is legally required to give answers. The statement does not prevent the officer from separating you. Maryland v. Wilson gives the officer that authority regardless. What the statement does is change the legal character of what follows. If you invoke before separation and your passenger says nothing afterward, there is no divergence to document. There is no inconsistency to cite. The gap the tactic is built to produce does not exist. Compare that to what happens when neither person speaks those words first. The officer separates you, asks each of you where you are headed. Your passenger says you are going to see a friend in the next city. You say you are going to visit family in the same area. The officer writes, driver and passenger gave inconsistent accounts of destination. That sentence, that sentence built from two honest answers that simply use different words, is now in the report as a factor in the reasonable suspicion calculation. Both of you cooperated. Neither of you lied. And you handed the officer exactly what the tactic was designed to collect. When it goes wrong. The 2023 federal appellate decision in United States v. Williams and Bloom documents precisely how this plays out. A trooper stopped a rental car. The driver, Williams, and the passenger, Bloom, were questioned separately about their travel plans. Williams described going to one city. Bloom described the same trip differently, mentioning a stop Williams had not mentioned, describing the pickup location in a way that did not match what Williams had said. Neither was lying. Both were describing the same trip from their own memory, under the stress of a traffic stop, without being able to hear what the other had said. The Sixth Circuit described the result as numerous oddities and inconsistencies regarding the defendant's travel, and cited those inconsistencies as a weighty factor in establishing reasonable suspicion to extend the stop. A drug-sniffing dog was called. The dog alerted. The search produced drugs. The conviction followed. The chain began with one ordinary question, "Where are you headed?" asked separately to two people who had the same honest answer and gave it in different words. That is the documented pattern. Stay calm. But understand exactly what that divergence costs you in the legal proceedings that follow. After the words. After you say the pre-separation statement, the officer's options narrow. They may still order the passenger out. Maryland v. Wilson does not evaporate because you invoked. They may still conduct a pat-down if they can articulate that the passenger may be armed and dangerous under Arizona v. Johnson. What changes is the interrogation arithmetic. If the passenger stays silent following your joint invocation, the officer has no divergent account to document. If the officer asks questions anyway and the passenger invokes, that silence cannot be treated as evidence of guilt. The invocation was explicit, on camera, before the question was asked. The officer's report may note that both occupants invoked the right to remain silent. That is not probable cause. Invocation of the right to remain silent and refusal to consent to searches cannot be used as factors in a reasonable suspicion calculation under federal precedent. Body camera footage will show the invocation happening before any question was asked. That sequence, invocation first, question second, is the legal record that protects what follows. The officer may still call a drug dog, run both names, wait for backup. But the informational gap the tactic was designed to produce does not exist, because neither person gave the separate accounts. It depends on collecting. The passenger's part. The passenger's job after the driver speaks is simple and specific: invoke and do not consent. When the officer approaches the passenger side, officers are trained to approach there precisely because occupants do not expect it. Giving the officer an observational advantage before anyone has composed themselves, the passenger should already know the invocation has been made. That is the second function of the pre-separation statement spoken by the driver. It is not only a legal invocation. It is a signal to the passenger: we are both invoking. You do not need to say anything else. If the passenger is questioned separately and asked where you are headed, the response is, I invoke my right to remain silent. Not a long explanation, not an apology, not a negotiation. That phrase, stated calmly on the officer's body camera, is legally sufficient. If the officer says the driver already told us everything, understand that is a permitted tactic. Officers may legally lie about what the driver said. Do not attempt to correct the record. Repeat, I invoke my right to remain silent. Stay calm. The passenger who maintains silence after a joint pre-separation invocation has created zero inconsistencies for the officer's report. That is the only outcome that protects both people once they are no longer in the same location. What stays with you? These 4 phrases go with you to every stop. Am I free to leave? I invoke my right to remain silent. I want an attorney. I do not consent to any searches. A note on state law before we close. In Ohio and Indiana, stop and identify statutes require you to provide your name when lawfully detained, but not destination, not travel plans. In Texas and Florida, the same requirement applies: identification only. In California and Illinois, state court precedent gives passengers stronger protection against questioning outside the scope of the stop. In every state, the federal floor applies. A joint invocation made before questioning begins carries legal weight. Verify your state's identification laws. The practical steps: say the pre-separation phrase out loud right now. Officer, we both invoke our right to remain silent. I do not consent to any searches. Say it until it is the first sentence your mouth produces when it hears the words "step out of the vehicle." This is educational content only, not legal advice. Consult a qualified attorney in your state. If this video gave you something you did not have before, hype it right now so it reaches the next person before their stop. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, and share it with anyone who has ever had a passenger in their car so this legal knowledge keeps reaching people before they need it. Get a dash cam. Viofo 4K is tagged below. 2-channel covers road footage. 3-channel adds the interior camera that records your invocation, records the officer at your window, records everything said before and after separation. Code traffic stop saves $10. Tagged below. The next video on screen covers constitutional protections that operate under a completely different legal standard, ones most people invoke incorrectly because they do not know when they apply. Watch it now. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is. You now have the one sentence that changes what separation can legally produce. Say it first.